As everyone knows, I'm Marisol Halpern. I'm the Director of Borough Operations for the Bronx Borough President, and I'm joined today with Kira, the Director of Community Boards, and Tom Lacania, our Senior Advisor. We'll go with roll call as we always do, so we'll start with Community Board 1.
Good morning, Anthony Jordan, District Manager of Bronx Community Board 1.
Board 2.
Good morning, Rob Acevedo, District Manager.
You guys can join the table. Community Board 3.
Adavada, District Manager, Community Board 3.
Community, I'm sorry.
Brown, Chair, Community Board 3.
Welcome. Community Board 4. Community Board 5.
LaShonda Batson, Community Coordinator. Oh,
Yeah. I'm so busy listening to you. Beverly Vaughn, Community Board Board Chair.
Community Board 5.
LaShonda Batson, Community Coordinator.
Community Board 6. Community Board 7.
Carla Cabrera Carrera, District Manager.
Community Board 8.
Farah Q. Rubin, District Manager.
Community Board 9.
Mohammed N. Majumdar, Chairman.
Community Board 10. Community Board 11.
Secure Rodriguez, Chair.
Jeremy Markey, District Manager.
Community Board 12.
George Torres, District Manager.
And moving on to the City Council members, District 8, Councilman Ayala.
Good morning, Alicia Miranda, Bronx Outreach, on behalf of Deputy Speaker Ayala.
Councilman Dinowitz.
Good morning, Stephanie Rodriguez, on behalf of Councilmember Dinowitz.
Councilman Riley. Councilmember Marmorato.
Martinez, representing Councilwoman Marmorato.
Councilmember Sanchez. Councilmember Feliz.
Esperanza Diaz, Chief of Staff for Councilmember Police.
Councilmember Stevens.
Hey, Dawn. Tariq Israel, Deputy Chief District Director for Councilmember Stevens.
Councilmember Salamanca.
Good morning, Saranya Jagadish, Director of Communications for Councilmember Salamanca.
Councilmember Amanda Farias. And we do have agencies present, so if you wish to identify yourselves. Parks.
Kevin Perez, New York City DOT, Bronx Borough Plan. Kenneth Johnson, Health Department, Community Affairs Team.
Nairobi Lazo, Department of Buildings.
Valerie Davis O'Neill, New York City Parks, Bronx Borough Commissioner's Office.
Jonathan Flynn, Assistant Director of Government and Relations, City.
Okay. Welcome to all. Our first presenter is from the, let me start again. Thank you again for being here today. We will have a presentation and conversation with the Metropolitan Transportation Authority as they share their 2025-2029 capital plan. We'd like to welcome Sean Fitzpatrick to speak to us regarding the capital plan.
Wonderful. Should I use the microphone or just? Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for having us. Very excited to talk to you about the state of the MTA's capital planning and especially our upcoming 2025 to 2029 plan. So, all right. So, from the MTA's perspective, transit is essential to New York, both in terms of our economic vitality, the affordability of the region. There's actually data that shows that it is 8 times cheaper to use public transit than to use a car in the New York metropolitan region. And in terms of the environment, the MTA helps keep 20 million tons of carbon out of the air every year. Our transit system is essential to what makes New York, New York. That transit system relies on capital investment. This is a not too subtle spot the difference graphic we put together as part of our 20-year needs assessment that came out 2 years ago now in 2023. And what I like about it is that each of the elements that is different from one side to the other, whether that's the rail cars themselves, the state of the stations, the sort of lighting, comfort, as well as some of the behind the scenes stuff like the cables running, that control the train's movement. All of those things are dependent on capital investment in order for us to keep the system in a state of good repair and in order for us to improve service. That has led to, a recognition sort of since the sort of summer of hell in 2017 of the importance of capital investment and of sort of taking care of some of the deferred maintenance that challenges an old system like the MTAs. So it's worth doing a little bit of background on the way the MTA does its capital investment. We're on a 5-year planning cycle and a 5-year budget cycle. So our 2020 to 2024 capital plan is sort of is in the process of being wrapped up. Now it was funded in part by congestion pricing's proceeds. And so with the uncertainty around congestion pricing, over the course of the last couple of years, it's a little bit slower in terms of finalizing the implementation of it, but now funding is fully available, and so we're able to proceed on that $15 billion worth of projects at the tail end of the 20 to 24 capital plan. This is a map with sort of a selection of the projects that will ultimately fund, including accessibility projects, making more stations ADA compliant, as well as a whole host of state of good repair work across the entire system, and sort of the exciting expansion project being 2nd Avenue Subway's second phase, bringing it into East Harlem. So that leads us to what's next, because at the end of this investment, as exciting and important as it is, we won't be close to finished with the work that needs to happen in order to keep the system running. And so that leads to the 2025 to 2029 capital plan, the next in our series of 5-year capital plans. So it's a proposal of a $65.4 billion plan dedicated to our transit system between New York City Transit, the buses, as well as the commuter railroads. And another $3 billion that is self-funded by our Bridges and Tunnels division to keep the 9 vehicular crossings in a state of good repair. And that's that piece of it is self-funded by toll revenue. The rest of it is what's sort of up for discussion as we seek funding for the plan. So at the bottom, there's a stat that says that more than 90% of this is dedicated to core infrastructure. What that means is that this is a plan full of need-to-haves, not nice-to-haves. It is a plan that is dedicated to rebuilding and improving the existing system rather than discretionary sort of expansion projects. And let me give you a sense of what that means. The focus and the way this plan was put together really starts and ends with state of good repair. So these are graphs pulled from both the 20-year needs assessment, which was a sort of multi-year labor of love to actually go through our system and rate on a scale of 1 to 5 the physical condition of nearly 6 million assets throughout the entire MTA portfolio. That helped us determine what percentage of the system, sort of in excruciating detail, is in a state of good repair and what is in what we call poor or marginal condition, in line with how the feds rate these things. And what that showed is that across the entire system, there's a significant backlog of state of good repair work that needs to happen in order for us to keep the system functioning. And so these graphs show in the lighter blue color, in the sort of bar on the left, and there's slightly more detailed and slightly better explained versions of this in the book itself that I'd encourage you to take a look at if you haven't. But the light blue shows what's in a state of good repair. The light red shows what's in poor or marginal condition. The bar on the right in these graphics shows what we choose or what we're planning to address in this capital plan. And what you'll see is that we're choosing, or we're seeking to bite off a significant portion of that backlog, even as it's sort of, we know it wouldn't be possible to do everything all at once. There's not enough money, and even if there were, we couldn't shut down the system and tell people to come back in a few years when we have it all fixed. So, but it's important that we size that investment appropriately, because the darker red on those graphics in the right are representations of the projected decay. We have a very old or a very old transit system, and every year it gets older. And so we need to stay ahead of the projected decay curve. And so substations, which power which are what provide the power to the subway system, are a great example. That's the graphic on the far left here. Today, more than a third of our substations have major components that are in poor or marginal condition. We're proposing in this plan to address nearly all of those, and certainly all of the most critical ones. And the reason that we're prioritizing that is because of the darker red here. We know that in another 5 years, another 10-15% of the substations will have aged out of their useful life and will need capital investment themselves. So this is a sort of a marathon, not a sprint from the MTA's perspective, and it's something that we're, asset category by asset category throughout the entire MTA system, looking to, make progress towards a state of good repair and make sure we're dealing with the most critical issues before sort of they break down and cause service disruptions. So that leads to what is sort of the projects proposed for the 25 to 29 plan. We have it sort of organized in three main buckets. The first is continuing to provide frequent and reliable service and to do better on both of those fronts. That's really the touchstone for those state of good repair investments that are necessary for us to keep service running. Improving the customer experience is another major theme. That speaks to the investments we're going to make in stations themselves to make them more inviting, more accessible, and also tougher to fare evade into. And finally, taking action on climate change is another key sort of necessity for any sort of large industrial asset base, and especially the MTAs. I'll go through sort of where we are in our fight to fortify the system and continue to be even greener as we move forward. So I've got slides on a bunch of these things, but this is sort of top line bullets of some of the things that the plan will do on sort of increasing the frequency and reliability of our service. It starts, sort of maybe the key investment is in rail cars. So this is a sort of moment to reflect on the history of the MTA capital plan. It was created in the 1980s under the leadership of Chair Dick Ravitch. And one of the first things that he did is he looked at the subway cars themselves, sort of that image of 1970s, early 1980s, pre-World War II subway cars covered with graffiti, and breaking down every 5,000 miles. Their mean distance between failure, how long they tend to go between needing to go into the shops to get overhauled, was about 5,000 miles. Think about if a car broke down every 5,000 miles. The cars that he replaced them with, where there was a massive influx of investment, replacing those cars and allowing the mean distance between failure to increase from 5,000 miles to 125,000 miles, a 25-fold increase. And that really was the symbol of the resurgence of the subway system and the fact that it was a reliable system that folks could depend on again. The newest cars that we've purchased, like the R211 featured here that runs on the A train, get up to 250,000 miles between failures, so doubling it yet again. And that just makes a massive difference in our ability to reliably provide service. And so we're excited to retire those 1980s era rail cars. They served us very well for the last 40 years, but they themselves are starting to break down more frequently, as sort of happens with age. And so we'll be replacing subway cars on the 1, 3, 6, B, D, N, Q, W, as well as all the shuttle trains throughout the system. And this will be both something that is much nicer, has better amenities, better lighting, integrated security cameras, better seating, more accessible features, and also just make a huge difference in our ability to provide service. And there's a similar story to tell for the Long Island Railroad and Metro North railroads, where there's another surge of 1980s era cars that are ready for retirement. Signal modernization is another major investment. This is one where I want to actually spotlight some of the work that will be happening as we close out our 20 to 24 plan, which will include investment on the 6th Avenue line in Manhattan, which is to say the B, D, F, and M trains. This is the single sort of biggest investment we can make. And we're focusing on those trunk lines in Manhattan because they're where we have the biggest capacity crunch, where multiple lines intersect. And so, at the end of this plan, we will have addressed all of the major B division, that is to say the letter lines, trunks in Manhattan, and that'll allow us to start spreading out further into the system. We're also going to be, as we upgrade those rail cars, including the ones on the 1, 3, and 6 trains, that'll allow those new cars will come equipped with the new signal equipment built right into them. So we'll be able to start investing in signal modernization on what we call the A division, the numbered lines, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 trains. So I say that conscious of being at Bronx Borough Board and not showing a lot of Bronx on this map. It's because we need to make the underlying investments first so that future plans will be able to bring those benefits into the Bronx. Maintenance facilities is another key area of investment. This is a sort of less positive history of the MTA capital program, which is that when budgets get cut, often the first thing to go is back of house spaces. And it makes sense. They're not things customers see, and they're sort of the easiest thing politically sometimes. but they're entirely essential to our ability to run service and to keep sort of cars in a state of good repair themselves. This is a photo of the Livonia shop in Brooklyn that services the number 3 train as well as the Times Square shuttle. It is, as you can sort of tell from the photo, 101 years old now, and it sort of looks every bit its age. It was a trolley car facility built for streetcars in the 1920s, and is, in addition to being sort of not in a sort of great state of physical repair, actually physically too small for us to maintain the new rail cars that we want to purchase. So one of the great features of the new cars that makes them more reliable and easier to maintain is that they have modular air conditioning units that load from the top of the train. And so what that means is in the summer, if an air conditioning unit breaks down, car can be brought into a shop, the AC is pulled out and swapped out, car goes back into service while they fix whatever's wrong with the AC. That's a huge benefit to our ability to sort of provide service. It's not physically possible in this shop as it's laid out. There's just not enough head height in order for you to do that maneuver. So in order for the 3 train to get new cars, we need to upgrade the back of house facility. And there's a very similar story for the number 1 train and its 240th Street shop here in the Bronx, where we'll be doing similar investments to reconstruct that facility in order to be able to maintain and upgrade the 1 train. And that's a very sort of, those are 2 of the most dramatic examples. There's sort of less comprehensive, but just as critical investments we'll be making to shops and yards and bus depots throughout the entire system. The Grand Central Artery is a key example of some of the structural work we need to do. This is the sort of our term for the 100-plus-year-old set of infrastructure that runs between Grand Central to the south all the way up to the Harlem River that allows Metro North service to go into Manhattan and get to Grand Central. We're currently in the process of reconstructing the Park Avenue Viaduct, which is the elevated structure in East Harlem. In this next plan, we want to significantly invest in the train shed around Grand Central itself. And the reason that's so important is sort of demonstrated by one of my favorite graphics, only one of them, but one of my favorite graphics in the book, which is to show the state of disrepair of that train shed. So this is the roof, essentially, of our train shed, and it is Park Avenue and some of these other, high-density commercial streets in East Midtown. And what the graphic shows on the bottom there is from 1980s on the left, all the way through just a couple of years ago on the right, is the number of defects that our inspections show in that steel. And what you see in the 80s and in the 90s was a scattering of isolated red dots, has accelerated sort of just as this asset has reached 100 years old, 100 years of age, and as sort of the salt and water and chemical infiltration has just reached a critical sort of breaking point. And so it's no longer possible for us to just spot repair, fixing one thing at a time. We have to go in and comprehensively reconstruct it. And that's necessary for Metro North service to be able to continue in the next 100 years, and for sort of the street itself to be safe. So we're going to make significant investments there. That is maybe that's a really significant example and sort of maybe the biggest ticket item in terms of structural work. But it's a similar story across the entire system. We did recently similar work, Frank, actually on the D line and the B and D line here in the Bronx, on the concourse line we call it, which required significant investment and a fair amount of disruption in order for us to rebuild the tunnel itself so that the Grand Concourse doesn't fall onto our tracks. So that's one we've done. We've got a lot more to do, and so across the system. Maybe the most relevant for the Bronx is the investment we'll make in the elevated lines. We have a new method that we've adapted actually from our bridges and tunnels folks to blast the existing paint off of an elevated structure, get in, have a really good visual inspection to be able to fix any steel repairs that are needed, concrete repairs that are needed, and then put new paint on that has a 30-year useful life, double the length of what was typically done in the past. We're going to do that on I think just about every elevated line in the Bronx, including the 2, 4, 5, and 6 trains. The 1 has a little bit of work that will happen in our current capital plan. So we're very excited to do this. It's something that, you know, is obviously aesthetically dramatically better for the communities that live below it, but it also helps us prolong the life of these structures that are so essential. And finally, you know, although there is no, you know, the vast majority of this plan is focused on state of good repair, we do have, you know, sort of an investment in continued improvements to the network, the sort of most prominent being the Interborough Express between Brooklyn and Queens, which has a sort of down payment to start construction in this plan. So those are the state of good repair investments. We'll also be making investments in the customer experience, again, sort of in the stations themselves. The heart and soul of that is our accessibility commitment. You know, the MTA is now, is just in a dramatically different place than we were 10 years ago even, in terms of our ability to get accessibility improvements done and our commitment to it. We reached a settlement agreement a couple of years ago with ADA advocates that's committed us on a path to getting the system more than 95% accessible over the course of the next few decades. And this proposal would make another 60 subway stations accessible in this plan. That's actually ahead of schedule on the settlement agreement we reached. And that'll include, you know, investments, meaning that the system will be more than 50% accessible, and that no customer will be more than one station away from an ADA station, no matter where they are in the system. So we're very excited to continue this pace of investment. You'll notice the map here, it says 60. There's only 30 stations on the map. That's because we're going to do some public engagement, really kicking off, you know, some of the engagement we've been doing across the boroughs, but also in a dedicated way with our accessibility partners starting later this month, in order to help determine the final 30 plus stations in the plan, so that we can, you know, get some community input. You know, a lot of this is dictated by, we have a run of 3 or 4 stations in a row that aren't accessible. We can get feedback and figure out which, you know, what's the right 1 or 2 to prioritize as we try to make the system comprehensively more accessible. And there's similar stories for our commuter railroads, which are a little bit ahead of the pace. And then the other key difference that folks will see in stations is modern fare gates. So this is a conceptual rendering. It's not precisely what it will look like, but it gives you the idea of replacing the turnstiles and, just as critically for us, the emergency exit gates with these automatic gates that open and close automatically. And what that'll allow us to do is, for customers who pay, make the system, you know, more exciting, more accessible. You know, for someone in a wheelchair or with luggage or with a stroller, it'll be much easier to have the gate sort of open for you. But it, just as importantly, it will close behind you. And that's true of the emergency exit as well. And that'll allow us to reduce fare evasion significantly. We lose more than $300 million a year to fare evasion in the subway system. And, you know, one of the things we know we need to do, in addition to all the sort of other sort of, you know, fare fares and some of the other programs, is we need to make the system itself physically different in order to, you know, not make it so easy for especially those sort of, you know, fare evaders of opportunity, folks who are, you know, just sort of sliding in the exit gate when they notice it's open, you know, make that a thing of the past. And we think that'll be a significant improvement, again, paired with making the system actually easier to use for folks who are paying their share and paying their fare. So, and then the final piece I want to touch on briefly is climate change. You know, we need to continue to invest in the system that was sort of built for the climate of the early 20th century to make sure that it's able to handle the 21st century's challenges. That'll mean you know, significant improvements to our ability to deal with flash flooding. You know, I think since Superstorm Sandy a decade and change ago, you know, we've made significant investments on coastal flooding, and the system is in a dramatically better place than it was a decade ago in terms of our ability to weather, you know, the next time a significant coastal storm hits the system. But there's a lot of work to do on flash flooding. And as we've all experienced, the sort of frequency and intensity of those flash flooding events that are unpredictable in terms of where they will hit is just a completely different story than it was a couple of decades ago. So we've been making investments to improve the system on that front. We're going to continue to rehabilitate our pump rooms, sort of making sure we're able to get water out of the system when it inundates it. And then most importantly, we're going to implement street level mitigations to keep water out in the first place. And a lot of that will require partnership with our friends at DOT, our friends at the Department of Environmental Protection, in order to coordinate our investments with them. This photo I like because it shows one of the key challenges that we're working with DOT on, which is making sure that when streets get regraded or get repaved, that they're milled appropriately first. What you see here is that the curb is essentially at the same level as the street. So the street and the sidewalk are essentially at the same level here. That means that in the event of a flash flood, there's no place on the street for that water to be detained while the sewer system sort of deals with the backup. And that means that it's overtopping the sidewalk going into the subway system through the ventilation grates. And that's a major cause of some of the sort of viral videos you've seen during storms like Ida and Fiona in recent years, where you've seen these sort of waterfalls in our subway system. That's a result of that. So we're working with DOT, we're working with DEP, we're making investments ourselves to raise the stairs and sort of be able to cover the vents in order to ensure we can run service safely and get folks home when sort of an unexpected flash flood occurs. And then on the other side of things, we will continue to make our service itself greener. We'll continue our zero emissions bus program. We're very excited to actually just on Friday, we announced the purchase of another 265 buses in our current capital plan. We're going to keep that investment up with another 500. And then the other piece of this that's just as important is we'll be investing in the depots themselves to add the infrastructure so that they can charge these new electric buses, and that the depots themselves get the state of good repair upgrades they need. It doesn't make any sense to install high voltage electrical equipment under a leaky roof. So we're going to be making investments to the physical infrastructure at our depots as we coordinate this work. So that's believe it or not, an abbreviated version of what is in the plan. This is a map showing some of the investment we'll be making throughout, again, the entire system. And it's true on the railroad level as well. I'll close on just a few points about sort of what else the plan means in addition to the investments, the direct investments. We are a really critical economic engine for not just the city, not just the region, but for the entire state. These numbers are sort of an analysis of our prior capital plan, but we expect the numbers to be, if anything, more substantial. More than 90% of the money gets spent in New York State. And that creates tens of thousands of jobs, billions and billions in GDP, again, in the region, but also shared very broadly. Bus manufacturers upstate, for instance. And it's also critical for MWBEs and small businesses. We have by far the most successful MWBE program in New York State, more than $1 billion a year paid out to minority and women-owned businesses. This plan will deliver, continue that pace. More than $7.5 billion estimated we'll be able to award to MWBEs and their sort of federal equivalent. And then the other piece I want to touch on is our small business mentorship program, which is sort of a unique thing across the state and across the city, but allows us to work directly with small businesses, sort of teaching them how to do business with the government agency, allowing them to get a steady cash flow on the one side and giving us, expanding our pool of good contractors on the other. That's been a very successful program. We're going to continue to bring hundreds of businesses into that program over the course of the next 5 years. And we're getting, all of this is adding up to us getting work done better, faster, and cheaper. The agency I work for, MTA Construction and Development, was created 5 years ago to consolidate all of the MTA's capital work away from the different individual agencies in recognition that we needed to be more efficient. We needed to, do things differently. And there's still a heck of a lot of work to do on that front, but I'd say we are making significant progress. The Park Avenue Viaduct replacement, sort of pictured on the far left here, is an example I would point to. Using design build and using, a sort of very different way of scheduling the work itself, we were able to work with the contracting community and come up with a plan to use this sort of large gantry. I'm not supposed to call it a crane, although it sure looks like a crane to me, but this large gantry that actually goes from one side of Park Avenue over our viaduct structure to the other. And what that's allowed us to do is go in, without disrupting service, install the new footings to replace this 130-year-old structure. then on weekends, with service still running on one half of the viaduct, so not actually canceling a single Metro North train, cut out the old structure, install new precast panels, and over the course of a series of weekends, we were able to replace 8 blocks worth of the structure last summer. Again, without impacting a single train of service, with having sort of minimal impacts on the street, and really significantly saving more than 2 years off of the project schedule, and with significant cost savings as well. So that's the sort of thing that the MTA of 10 years ago, we've had smart engineers, we've had a great contracting community for a long time. What we didn't have were the tools like design build, like project CEOs who sort of are able to manage the work really directly, to empower them to get the work done in that way. And so we're actually significantly ahead of schedule and very excited to do that work. We want to apply that in places all across the city. Actually, that Grand Concourse structural replacement project that we did last year was a great example where, while coming in a little bit under budget, we did 50% more steel replacement than we'd previously planned on. And it was because we had a very capable project executive who was empowered to make decisions on the ground in order to progress the project. So all told, that saved us, and I can actually now safely update that based on our 2024 contract awards to more than $1 billion in savings versus previous engineering estimates. And we're able to get more work done than ever before. The graph on the left here is a representation. I said we're in a different place than we could have imagined a decade ago on accessibility. There's no, that is maybe one of the greatest examples of it. Previously, when the MTA wanted to make a station accessible, we made one station accessible. And that meant that for every individual station, we had to go through the contracting process. We had to select and negotiate a contractor. The contractor had to mobilize, set up a field office. We had to have individual, sort of oversight structures and budget accounting work. Now what we do is we bundle that work together, and sometimes as many as 13, 15 stations in one contract. That allows us to get dramatically more work done more efficiently, and it's the reason we've been able to scale up our accessibility program, 3 to 4 times the pace as we were doing previously. And that sort of is the case across the program. We're getting more done than ever before. So I guess that's my last slide. But thank you very much for your attention. Very happy to answer questions. And yeah.
Any questions? Acting Jeremy.
Thank you so much for that presentation, and it was very.
I'm sorry, can I just hand you the? And then Jeremy.
Good morning. Joetta Brown, Chairperson, Community Board 3. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was very well done and certainly covered a lot of information, just a lot of information. My question concerns not necessarily the work to be done, because it is, as people access and use the transportation system, we all recognize that it needs continuous maintenance in order for it to operate efficiently. My question is, how are you putting in place situations that when your top management turns over, that your plans of operation will continue to progress and not have to stop and start over?
It's a really good question. It's one we spend a lot of time thinking about and working on. Part of it was the sort of driving impetus for the creation of MTA Construction and Development, sort of put all of that sort of, rather than having 5 different agencies, 5 different planning structures and 5 different capital structures, it's all in one place now. And so we have a planning group that is already working on the 2030 to 34 capital plan and beyond, in order to make sure that there is a long-term vision, that there is a sense of what is the right prioritization, how do we get to a system that really is in a state of good repair. It's not going to happen overnight, so we need a long-term plan. And so part of that thinking, was the 20-year needs assessment that we put out. Again, a sort of long-term vision. with data presented very transparently, sort of the condition of all the assets across, category by category across the entire system, presented plainly as what's in a state of good repair and what isn't. Those are the sorts of systems that we're putting in place that I think should provide some long-term stability. I will say another key piece is the 5-year capital planning process is something that allows for a certain level of stability and sort of long-term planning. Sometimes capital plans have been fully funded. Other times when they aren't, that does lead to more challenging short-term funding decisions and sort of prioritization decisions. So that's why we're grateful for the support we've gotten from the governor, from the legislature so far, and hopeful that we can get a fully funded capital plan in this upcoming legislative session, because being able to plan 5 years ahead makes a heck of a lot of difference in terms of our ability to be efficient, to bundle work together, versus having to go year by year and finding ourselves more vulnerable to changes in leadership, as you say, or just funding availability.
Good morning. I didn't see anything about safety improvements. Is there a reason why?
It is a really important part. A lot of that comes down to the operational investments we're making in, additional, working with PD to have additional presence on the platforms and in the system. I will say, though, it is part of the capital work we'll be doing. So we'll be replacing and sort of upgrading security cameras across the system, continuing to, upgrade so that we have real-time monitoring of more locations and more stations. And we have cameras in every station now, but some of them are harder to access than others. And then the other thing I'd note is that I think the fare evasion investment, or the investment in preventing fare evasion, rather, is a key safety piece. We see time and time again that when there are incidents in the system, they are often perpetrated by someone who skipped the fare on their way in. And so by hardening the system itself, making it harder for somebody to get in without paying, we think we will see significant safety benefits. One other piece to note is that the new train cars we're purchasing will have, we have cameras in every car now. Similarly, it'll be an upgrade to these new ones that will have more angles, easier to access, not just diagnostically and forensically, but proactively.
So what about barricades?
Yeah, barricades is a great question. We're in the process of installing, more of these sort of barriers throughout the system. We're still finalizing the exact plan for what the 25 to 29 plan is going to go, where we're going to go on that front. But we anticipate installing many, many more, really scaling up our investment in those platform edge barriers.
Is there anything you can share with us after the meeting is over? A week or two that you could send us?
Absolutely.
Regarding that?
It's actively in planning now, and I think there will be an announcement coming very soon that I'll make sure we get out to you all.
Please do.
Absolutely.
Hi, good morning. I have 3 questions, and I can build on each one, or I could ask you all 3 at the same time.
Dealer's choice.
All right. So my question, and it's based on, I was in the city council when Yankee Stadium was built. And part of the agreement back then was the city parks department was going to give us $200 million to invest in parks. But one of the caveats was that the city or the council members individually should continue to invest in parks so that the $200 investment would have a major or a more impactful thing. I say that to ask, is that what's going on here? You're $15 billion, 90% of which is going into the system or core. How much is currently in the capital project? And is that $15 billion going to supplement that? Or is this just taking over and now the state legislators and the governor and everybody else is like, all right, well, we got congestion pricing. We don't have to worry about investing. That's going to take care of it.
It's a great question. So it is a cyclical investment that needs to continue to be made. So the current capital plan, I'll step back and give a few of the numbers. The current capital plan is a $55 billion capital plan, of which congestion pricing's $15 billion was the final component to come together. This current plan is actually a little bit less than that one, adjusted for inflation. We've seen 30% inflation in the construction sector in New York over the last 5 years. So we're coming in a little bit below that, but it builds on it. It is the next step. It is not a substitute for it. It doesn't mean that, and vice versa. The fact that we're managing to finish out 20 to 24 on a strong note doesn't mean that there aren't more things we need to do. It's the largest subway system in the world. with also the largest bus fleet in North America. It's all 100 years old, more or less, and needs significant investment. So yeah, it's absolutely essential that we get on a sustainable front so that every 5 years we're able to look ahead to the next 5 years and know what we're going to do to methodically make the system into a state of good repair.
All right. The second question, building on the first one, also using Yankee Stadium as an example, $15 billion is a lot of money. 15 years later, we are finally spending, I think, the last of the $200 million, 15 years. Is the agency, you spoke a little bit about the procurement of hiring to do multiple ADA projects at one time, but is the agency capable of spending that $15 billion in 1 year?
Yeah, so we're working very hard to make sure the answer to that is yes. I should clarify, the congestion pricing money itself will be spent over the course of a couple of years as the sort of money comes in and the bonding capacity sort of is built out. That being said, we absolutely anticipate being able to get $15 billion plus worth of work done. And there's a couple of reasons I want to note. One is that bundling that I mentioned. We've done it with ADA projects. We want to do it across the system a lot more aggressively and effectively going forward. In this next plan, what that will mean is, when there is work that will require an outage in one place, when we are, in order to do that ADA project, you're going to need to shut down a stretch of track. Well, let's also do the track work at the same time. Let's do the pump room that you can only access from that set of track at the same time. And so we're trying to build together these bundles of projects so that A, we can get more done at once. B, we can be more, sort of respectful and efficient with our customers' time. When we have an outage, let's do everything we can at the same time, not plan on coming back again at a later date. And it also helps us sort of, there's a lot of work to do with our contracting community, but it'll make things more efficient and predictable for them too. So that's one key piece of it. The other piece I'd note is that there's a lot of different type of work throughout this $65 billion capital plan. The purchase of the new rail cars is a key example. That's a long-term project. That's going to take 10 years for those cars to be manufactured and all of them to sort of the last one to be delivered. So what we need is to, set ourselves up to be on a sustainable framework with those manufacturers. We are by far the biggest customer left in the United States for subway cars. And so if we don't provide the manufacturers with a long-term look ahead and something they can plan on and scale their facilities for, they're going to struggle to do so. And we've seen the sort of competition shrink and shrink over the last couple of decades. So, that's very different than managing construction in the system, but it makes it, on the one hand, it makes it easier to actually hit some of the numbers we're talking about. On the other hand, it's another key sort of work stream that we have to make sure we get right.
All right, so finally, building on that, like I said, $15 billion every year is a lot of money. If I recall correctly, reading the articles, the estimate was supposed to be a lot higher, but because of the delay, we're now estimating, I guess MTA is estimating that it's $15 billion a year. The question is, what happens? This is supposed to change behavior. I mean, that's the goal. It's supposed to be environmental. What happens if you don't meet that $15 billion benchmark? I've heard rumors that there's expansion into the outer boroughs. If that doesn't happen, is that the case?
Yeah, there's certainly no planning underway for anything other than the current program that is 8 days old at this point. What I would say is that one thing I want to clarify: the $15 billion is not an annual revenue projection. The revenue projection was something like $1 billion a year, and that would create the bonding capacity to do $15 billion worth of work. And so with the reduced toll, sort of at the implement of the program, as well as, we have, we think, very good models demonstrating sort of what the traffic is going to look like. If the revenue projection, if it's more successful in reducing congestion than even the models have shown, that will sort of make the finance a little more complicated, maybe take a little longer to hit that $15 billion bonding capacity, but it'll still allow us to do that work in a timely manner. So it's something that is certainly something that's going to take a lot of hard work to get right, but we have one of the best finance teams, municipal finance teams in the country, and they're hard at work making sure that we're prepared for any contingency.
I just want to get to Community Board 11. I didn't know. You didn't raise your hand? Oh, okay. So then,
No, you can pass.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Thank you. So I wanted to talk about I know that what unfortunately what our constituents are learning more about is that subway fares are going up, and anticipating we have an aging system, so we have to continue to find a way to raise money. I'm going to help you out with your message. So with that, how is the agency working to inform our constituents about what you're doing? Because all they're seeing is this capital, or all they're seeing is this boards and things up in the street and in the community, but they don't understand about what you're doing. The unfortunate inheritance that our community gets is that we have all these capital projects happening, but they end up becoming projects that last longer than people are in office, or longer than administrations. And so they just understand that they're becoming, unfortunately, inheritance of these type of systems. So how are you informing or engaging your audience and making sure that they understand the work that's happening in a capital way?
It's a really good question. It's something my team spends a lot of time thinking about and working on, and I think we've made some progress. We've got a lot of work to do to make make the signage clearer, have it explain what is happening behind that blue barricade in the system. We've tried to create more videos and things actually, showing folks behind the scenes. We're actually later today launching a newsletter that will be going out on a regular basis showing, here were the outages this weekend. What was the work that we actually got done behind those barricades? So it's something that we do think a lot about. Obviously, Jonathan and our government community relations team is out, meeting with folks on a sort of daily basis, trying to explain the impacts as they're happening and show progress. And then the other piece is, fundamentally, we need to get our work done on time and on budget. That's the most important thing, is that when we put a date out, we say, the Concourse project was, I think, a great example where, there were significant impacts. Having no express service on the D for that period of time, it hurt people's commutes. We knew that the cost of not doing that would potentially be something, much more catastrophic and harder to plan for. So, we worked very hard to make sure that, we said it would be done at a certain point. We were. And that I think is the most important part of sort of rebuilding some of the trust, is making sure that when we make a commitment, we get there. If site conditions mean we can't, that we explain that clearly and are out, at community boards, obviously, but in a whole lot of other ways, directly interacting with customers. But it's a really important point. One, I think we need to keep trying to figure out how to be more responsive to folks in a sort of social media age.
I want to add to that as a comment. I don't think it's happening enough in the Bronx, especially signage that talks about what capital projects are happening. If you visit a lot of the sites where capital projects are happening in the Bronx, you don't see much signage, and you don't see completion dates or expected completion dates. So I ask that you take a strong look at that, so that our constituents understand what are the interruptions and what are the improvements that are happening, and what and then that we are able to hold you accountable to not completing projects on time and close on time because of instances like this is happening, especially where ADA improvements are happening.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
That's a great point. I appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Simone Jones, Chief of Staff for Councilmember Riley. Sorry for my tardiness. Sean, it's nice to see you this morning. Yes. I have a very specific question, and forgive me if I missed it, but you spoke about in the plan the zero emission buses and the 1.4 million, specifically the upgrades to existing depots, but I didn't hear you talk about creating any new ones. And I know the MTA acquired space in our district. I believe it was an old golf course, right, George? The Gun Hill Road Depot. Yep. You guys acquired the space, so I don't know if any of this capital funding is to create that new depot, to conduct the impact study. I don't know if that's a part of this capital plan. If it is, would love to hear any information you can share about it. And if it's not, we can always follow up on the back end of things. But you specifically spoke about upgrades to existing depots and no new ones. So definitely want to hear about that.
It's a really always great to see you, Simone, and it's a great question. So the work that's going to happen, there is an existing depot at Gun Hill. We owned through a series of complicated 1980s era real estate transactions, we have owned that sort of former golf course space for a few decades. What is going to happen there is that private partner is coming in, is going to build a industrial facility, and the ground floor of it is going to be the MTAs. And so I actually need to get back to you on whether it's this capital plan or the 20 to 24 capital plan. We will be responsible for the fit out of that space. So we'll have to actually, go in and install the electrical charging equipment and that sort of thing, and the shop, the other shop things. It will serve in practice as an extension of the existing Gun Hill Depot. Sort of they're right adjacent. They'll have the same sort of leadership, operate as one operation. So that's why I didn't call it out as a new depot. But you're right. It's a brand new physical space, and it's one that is going to be really important. It's going to help. It'll be one of the first, fully electric depot facilities we have, and that will mean that, sort of the routes that it serves will be able to be prioritized for electric service.
Thank you, Sean.
Of course.
Good morning. Thank you for that, Sean. I have a quick question. My concern is about safety and air quality. So when you said, I know that right now, even in my district, they're doing some sandblasting. And I just wanted to know what, they're doing sandblasting and they're putting up signs about asbestos. So what actions are MTA taking or the contractors taking to make sure that our constituents are safe when this type of work is going on? Because the particular work that's happening in my community district is affecting one of the buildings, one of the residential buildings, and a program that they run. So my concern is a lot of these elevated train stations that have to be painted, that have to be refaced and stuff, they're going to be using a sandblasting method, right? So how is that affecting the air quality, and how does it affect our constituents? What actions will,
Yeah, it's a really important point. So one of the reasons that we like the sandblasting approach is that it can be, and the way we are sort of holding our contractors to will be, fully contained. They will put up tents, they will put up these sort of airtight sort of seals in order to make sure. But what it means, the other thing that it means is on the other end of it, we're getting all of the lead paint and the asbestos and all those other things off of the structures. So rather than the old way of doing business where we would sort of cover it up, and that works to some extent, but you have to constantly go back, and if you don't maintain that properly, it doesn't work anymore. And so the new way of doing business is more intensive. It does require this investment on the contractor's part, on our part, to make sure that we're holding them to the every single letter of what they need to do. But the structure that's put up means that those there isn't any risk to folks outside of the work zone. That this is a sort of thing I've seen come up before, where the signage itself has warnings for folks who are entering the work zone. They don't reflect the idea that anything is going to leave that work zone. And that's what sort of the tent structure that you see built up when we do this sort of work is designed for. And we have a very smart environmental engineering team that works to make sure that when we do this work, we're following every safety standard. And that we're making sure that there aren't impacts. Obviously, it's noisy. There's things that are obviously impactful to the neighboring community while we're doing the work, but that we are absolutely mitigating and preventing any sort of environmental impact to the community.
Okay. Unfortunately, it has affected the program because they're how they have it closed off. Somehow, it's going into their HVAC system.
What location are you talking about?
What's the location?
You can follow up with us later too, but okay.
I get,
you know Jonathan.
Jonathan has the information.
Okay, I'll follow up with Jonathan then, and figure out what happened there.
They relocated
the
program. However, I'm just putting it out there. That's something that you have to be mindful of because it is an air quality issue.
Yeah.
And the not just the residents, but even the workers, they were experiencing headaches and things of that nature, feeling nauseous. So I'm saying, like, you have these signs up, asbestos, hard hat area. Maybe you might want to say put a mask on or something as well, to help, so people will know that within this area, they should be mindful about the air quality.
That's a great point.
Tyreek is from Councilman Stevens.
Thank you.
How you doing? So I got quite a couple questions. I'll keep it short as possible, though. So we mentioned safety, and definitely wanted to hear more about that plan. With the rise of subway surfing culture, what kind of considerations were taken in when we purchased the new train fleet? Were there any kind of safety features that could be added to the new carts and the new fleet that may be able to prevent or mitigate the culture?
Yeah, it's a very challenging issue and one that we have spent a lot of time thinking about. The new cars, do have, better security cameras, better monitoring so that you can sort of prevent an incident. If you notice somebody is in a place where they shouldn't be, we've been sort of piloting and have recently announced that we're purchasing more of the open gangway cars, which are the ones that are connected from car to car, so there isn't sort of an access point in between. With 6,000 subway cars, it's tough to figure out some sort of a retrofit that would be sort of obviously the right one, but having better monitoring, having more of these open gangway cars, and some of the other things, there's other work sort of going on that I'm not intimately familiar with, but it is obviously a key challenge and one that we're working with anybody who's willing to help us to try to deal with.
Okay. You mentioned the substations. There are some substations that are identified as critical and in real disrepair. I wanted to see if there were any specific or how many of those stations were in the Bronx, and what is the plan to address them? Because I know the plan was, a lot of it was centered around Manhattan, but
yeah, I'll have to get you the numbers in the Bronx. It's in all 5 boroughs where we have these challenges and where we plan to address them. The key things that we're looking at when we sort of prioritize this investment is where we have not just one substation that's in a state of disrepair, but a couple in a row. And the reason is that they're designed to be redundant. If one substation goes down, the next one on the line can pick up the slack. We don't want that to happen, but it's when we're looking at criticality, that's the key thing we look at. And these things, they tended to all have been built at the same time. And then, if they were built in the 30s and they came due in the 70s, maybe all that investment also happened all in the same place at the same time. So we're trying to get away from that and have a little bit more variation so that we're able to do the work in a cyclical manner without, sort of an area becoming, a real emergency. I know there's a ton of work that will happen in the Bronx. I can get you the number. It really is, because in Manhattan is where the highest sort of, where the lines come together and where you have the most trains, sort of per hour in a particular place, there are more substations proportionally in Manhattan. But this problem exists in every borough, and it's something that we're going to be investing in all across the city.
Okay. Is there any timeline or repairs for the elevated stations? For example, in my district, on the 4 line, we have holes in our steel beams that you can see through and put your fist through. And with the trucks trying to avoid the congestion pricing going through the Cross Bronx, they hit the beams all the time. So, I don't know when the last MTA study was done, but it doesn't really look like it's in a good state. So I just wanted to know, were there any kind of timelines associated with these elevated train repairs?
Yeah, so the structures themselves, we're going to do another 20 miles. We have 60 miles across the entire system. We're going to do 20 miles in this next plan, including every major elevated line in the Bronx. We'll get the sort of sandblasting, steel repair, and then painting to overcoat it so that it's sort of it has a good useful life for the next 30 years. The stations themselves, we've got a ton of work to do on our stations, elevated and underground. And so we're going to the plan is to move to a 15-year repair cycle. And what that means is that in every plan, we'll get to a third of the stations. It used to be that we would sort of, actually to the point from earlier, if a different philosophy came in, we'd be prioritizing different things in each plan, and it might mean that a station went decades without having, gotten some of the basic, stair repair, some of these structural elements you're talking about. So the plan is to move to a much more cyclical, predictable system and have that tie in with some of the bundling contracts that we're trying to do. So we'll be in a lot of places over the course of the next 5 years, both on the structures themselves and in the stations.
Okay. And lastly, I noticed that there were only 5 slated stations for 88 upgrades in the Bronx. What can we do as our offices to up that number? Because it just seems like we have more train stations that need to be upgraded.
Yeah, you do. So one thing I'd say, it's 5 out of the first 30. So there's another 30 stations still to be named. We are eager to work with you all to determine what the...
citywide though, right?
No, it'll be 60 citywide when we're done. So 30 citywide, it'll be 60 citywide by the time we're done. 60 plus, actually, we anticipate, depending on how cost estimates come in, being able to do better than 60. as we've actually already been able to do in our current capital plan, increase the number as we went on and got good bids from our contractors. So what you can do is, we're very eager to hear prioritization. We will be going out and, starting to publicize where we know there are gaps and where we want feedback on what the right prioritization is within it. If there's a run of 3 stations, we're going to do one of them in this plan. Which one should we sort of choose, and how should we prioritize going from there? So there will be a lot of engagement coming forward. Very eager to work with you all on figuring out, that number will go up as we sort of fill out the back half of the plan.
Okay, and just my last question, quick. With the capital repairs slated in 29, could we expect, what's their projected expected increase in, I guess, how do you refer, timeliness from mass transit on buses and trains? I know there was a projection associated with creating bus lanes. What's the projected associated now with the upgraded fleets, and you said new carts that won't go down as often?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one we're sort of struggling to try to get all the data together to give you a sort of a real answer. The fact is, it's a million different things in this plan will have a positive impact. How to quantify that precisely is challenging, but things like the signal upgrades, signal defects are one of the leading causes of delays in the system. We think we can cut that significantly. The cars themselves being more reliable, that will have an impact on our ability to get through rush hours. I live on the D train in Brooklyn. It feels quite frequent that a door goes out of service on a train, and so sort of the rush hour commute is messed up on the D line. That's something that we will be able to fix. So it's a great question. It's one that we have folks trying to figure out how to quantify now. A lot of variables, but this will make a significant impact. Where we've put the new signals in, we increase speeds by something like 5 to 10%, which over the course of a run adds up to minutes saved every day for folks. So again, I've got a few little snippets of it. I don't have a full sort of panoramic picture for you, but it's something we're working on. It's a good question.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Ms. Brown?
Yes, on one of your slides, when you spoke about new rail cars, you mentioned the 1, 3, 6, B, D, and so on. You didn't mention the 2, 5, and 4.
Yeah. So the 2, 5, and 4 have cars that are from the 21st century already. So those cars are not sort of slated for this plan. They will need to be replaced, but they are still all from sort of the year 2000 and beyond. So they're still within their useful life. So it's essentially, the way to think of it is, anywhere you see an orange seat in the system, that's a car from the 80s that needs to be replaced. Where you see the blue seats, those cars are new enough, and they're performing quite well. So that's the simple answer.
Hold on. Ms. Bond?
Yeah, I just have one quick question. And since you mentioned the cars, I see now that they have the cars with no doors. I mean, you can walk from one end of the car to the other end of the car. Where exactly are those cars being put into service at?
Yeah, so we have a couple of them in the system now. They're on the C train right now. Going forward, we've ordered more. We're figuring out where they'll be deployed.
George? Not 3.
No, I have a clarification on question 3. You said that there's no plans. Oh, sorry. I have a clarification request on question number 3. You said, when I asked you about expansion plans, you said that there were no plans to do that. Does that require legislative?
It would, yep.
Okay, so it's not in the legislation. For example, they reduced the fee to $9, I guess it is, to go into the congestion, but there was off-peak and peak and I guess gridlock days. So is that at the discretion of the MTA, or does that require a legislative fix?
The legislation that created the congestion relief zone specifically defined what that area was. So that is written in black and white in the law itself where it is. The structure of the fees and things, those were delegated to a process that was laid out in the legislation that we followed, but the boundary itself is set in legislation.
Thank you, Marisol. Just to be clear, when we're talking about barricades, we're talking about things to prevent people from getting pushed onto the tracks, right?
Yep.
Okay. Because I've been to other countries where it's like the AirTran at JFK, where you can't throw stuff onto the tracks, you can't create fires, you can't push people.
So there's a difference between the full platform screen doors with the moving parts versus the sort of fixed fences that we've been installing, the barriers. The platform screen doors are very, very challenging to retrofit into an 100-year-old system. And on the elevated lines, they can't take the extra weight of it, was a key finding. We did a full engineering survey of the system. So that was sort of a sort of massive challenge that we haven't come up with a way to overcome, other than putting in these fixed barriers that create sort of safe places of refuge across the platform, and provide a place to stand for folks can hold onto a railing. And we think that so far we've been surveying customers in the stations we've put them in. People do feel safer, and we think it's sort of early to have sort of data showing how well they work on a sort of day-to-day basis. But that's the thing we're talking about expanding pretty dramatically in the near future.
Great, thank you. One question. I know that there is a survey that is being done asking for public input. I thought I saw something that was being shared, Jonathan, regarding input on some.
Yes, I saw other plan as well.
Yeah.
I'll follow up on that.
Yeah, and I'll share it with everyone so then you can also provide input as well. I know I saw it.
Yeah, we will have in the near future. This hasn't launched yet, but to the council members' representative's point, we will have a survey online asking folks to nominate ADA stations and sort of talk about that. So that will be a specific piece of input we're seeking. That'll come out in the next few weeks, and we'll make sure to share that around very widely. Absolutely, yeah.
Whatever I
yet,
get, I'll
but
make
soon.
sure you guys get. But
Yep.
I thought I saw it. I'm going to go look
Yeah, and
for
we're
it.
always surveying, so.
I know there's
yeah.
always surveys, so I will make sure that everyone gets that information. I want to thank you for taking the time to answer all our questions, and
Thank
I'm
you.
sure if any other questions come up, we'll make sure that you get them. So I want you to know that we definitely appreciate the time that you've taken to share this plan with us, and we look forward to all of the improvements that can be done in our borough for our residents and our commuters. Thank you so much for
Wonderful,
that.
thank you.
With that said, I'm going to ask Betty McCray, who's here to talk about the budget process within the Borough President's Office. She is our Director of Capital Programs. I know you guys have had relationships with her before, but we thought it important to share what that process is internally and how that then is reflected within the Borough Board process. And I give you Betty McCray.
Hi. Good morning. Oh, yes, it's still morning. Happy New Year, everyone. The budget process for the Borough President's Office, very, very simple. It's not really complicated, especially for the organizations and schools that want to apply for funding from the Borough President's Office. We have our application online. It's been online since October. If they visit our website and they go to the budget, they'll see that application is simple 16 questions that we ask them. We also ask that they reach out to their council members so that we can partner with projects when that comes to it. We ask also for our schools, our public schools. We meet with them every October to walk them through the process. We have a whole resume meeting downstairs with them in our office. We feed them, we do everything with them, and we ask them to follow this process that we have. Simple questions, very simple. The minimum that they can ask for is $50,000. The maximum any organization can ask for, whether it's school, whether it's community-based organizations, whether it's any institutions, they can go as high as they want to. Not to say that's what the Borough President is able to fund them, because what we get every year is not the same. The way that the budget is broken up to by the mayor, we receive 5%. And when I say we, I mean all 5 borough presidents receive 5% of the total capital budget that the mayor has. That money is not split evenly, however. The 5 borough presidents, 5% is based on population and land. The Bronx usually falls number 3 in that list. Brooklyn is usually number 1, Queens, Bronx, Manhattan, Staten Island. So every year that number may be different, and it is different. It could be as high as 62 million, saw that, as low as 9 million. Saw that as well. And it could be given, we have two sections. One section is section 211. The other section is section 249. I know the city council members don't have two sections. The borough president's office, however, does. So on the one section, which is the preliminary budget, we receive an amount. That's after the mayor releases his preliminary budget, then we're able to get that number. And it usually comes in a certificate form, and it tells how much money the borough president has to spread throughout the entire borough for that section. When section 249 comes out, according to the city charter, that number may go up or that number may go down. I've been here one time when it went down, and that was during the pandemic. So we had to reduce our budget $9 million during the pandemic, which was complicated to do. That's after we allocated funding to these different programs, and we had to reduce that. So if you know any schools, community-based organizations, non-for-profits, that's the only catch, is that the community-based organizations have to be a non-for-profit, must be a non-for-profit. There's a list of things that they may need when they fill out that applications. The major things that they may need is 3 financial audits. They have to have a city operating contract, do business in New York. They have to have a total budget. And the other part of that is that the money is reimbursed. So we also have to let the community-based organization know that that funding is reimbursed, which means that they have to put out the money first, complete the project, then they go to the city to get their money back. So a lot of organizations really don't know that. So I try to make it very clear to them. And also, if you guys have any organizations that you know may need funding, please tell them to email me. Don't call me. There's one person that works in capital budget, and that's me. So it's best that they email me and not call me on the phone, because that's going to be it takes a little bit longer to explain all of that on the phone as opposed to me just typing it up and them getting a quick, direct answer from me. What we do is we meet with the city council members after we receive our complete list of all the projects that we have received. Last year we received over 400 projects, over $400 million that we had to reduce to $25 million. So usually the majority of the borough president funding goes to school. For the last 3 fiscal years that she had, over 50% of her budget went to education, installing in technology, making sure every school is tech equity and they have the technology they need for their school. That's the budget part of it. That's the part that we reach out to the organization so they can submit that application. Our deadline, however, is January 31st to receive our application. There's a second part for those non-for-profits that's not city-owned, and that's a CAP grants application that's online. But if they're applying for funding from the borough president and city council, they have to go by our deadline, which is February 20th, for the CAP grants application online. I believe the city council is a month behind us. So we're first, city council comes second. So they're doing both. They're asking for funding from the borough president and the city council office. They have to go by our deadline. Please let them know that if you're going to reach out to them they're going to ask us for funding, because you can tell them, you can reach out to anybody and say, submit an application to the borough president's office for funding. Whether they qualify for it or not, I'll go through that process with them and let them know whether they'll be eligible for capital funding for fiscal year 2026, which is coming up. That's the easy part of it. The other part of it is, now we also have, which we will make you guys responsible for, and that is we have a public hearing that's going to be coming up, and that's based on the mayor's preliminary budget that should be out. He has to bring it out either this week or next week. That's according to what the city charter says, but we'll see how that works out. So we have that preliminary budget that comes out, then we have a public hearing where anybody can come in and give testimony about the mayor's budget. That is included in the borough board report that we submit to you guys also for review, for amendments, for edits that you guys eventually going to have to vote on sometime in March. So hopefully in the next borough meeting that you guys have in February, we should have that public hearing. We will have flyers that we can also send you guys, so that way you can distribute to anybody that may need it. the vote comes on the report sometime in March, I believe. So we're going to have all those dates available for the board to review and go over that part of it. So that's what you guys will be responsible for. Well, I mean, we will do the report. We're just going to give it to you guys to review, make edits, make amendments, give your comments on it. Hopefully we can get that to you guys ahead of the time, maybe a week or two ahead of the actual vote that's coming on, so you guys have time to review it, so it won't be a rush and you guys don't feel like you're pressured into voting on saying yes to something that you really are not in agreement with. I think that's about it for right now that I could remember off the top of my head. Am I missing something? Oh, yes. And how we get, I know that a lot of times you ask me, well, where do you get from the community boards, where are you getting this list of my priorities for the capital and expense? We take that off of what you guys submitted to the mayor's office when it's your priority report. And I think you guys did it sometime in September or October, if I'm not mistaken. So we take the first 10 of your capital and the first 5 of your expense. So that's also included in the report as well. So that's where we get that information from. So when you look at it and you go, oh, we didn't do this. Yes, you did. That's how we got it. So that's that part of that. And I believe that's it for right now. You know, am I missing anything else I was going to talk? No, that's about it.
Does
Yes.
anybody have any questions from what Buddy just said? So just to add to that, we're looking at our schedule and we're looking to see when we can have the public hearing. So rather than have you guys come, we usually combine it with a borough board. So the next borough board we're scheduling for is February 10th. So perhaps that'll be the date of the public hearing. We'll do the report, and then by the March meeting, there should be a vote on that budget priorities report. But as Betty said, we're looking to have that completed within a time that makes sense for you guys to review it, because we obviously appreciate any input, and obviously we want to vote at the end of the day so that we can submit it properly to the mayor's office. There is a schedule for that, and we'll get back to that once we know what that exactly is, but yes.
I have a question. If a community board would like to request funding for office relocation, is that something that the borough president's office would?
You said office
relocate.
If we wanted to relocate our office to a building that the city owns but doesn't have the money to revitalize, is that
to do the renovations on it or to acquire it. You can submit that, yes, and that would be considered city. So that way you don't have to do that online application because you're a city agency.
Okay.
It's the same with technology as well. You know, I think a lot of people really don't realize that you can actually apply for technology as well. There are things that you guys can actually ask for that you guys usually don't, but there are things in your office that perhaps our office can pay for if the borough president finds that a priority, because we actually sit down and discuss every single application that comes in. And when I say we, I mean me and the borough president.
Councilmember Feliz.
Yeah, so it's just like a quick question, like going, like with the technology. So let's say like a nonprofit asks for technology, like so they can actually like apply for like computers and things for their education program. So like any like nonprofit can apply.
Yes.
For your phone. Thank you.
They can apply for capital funding. If it's programming, we can't. We don't have any expense monies for that. So if it's capital, yes. Equipment, yes. Technology, yes. Machinery, yes. Relocation, yes. Construction, yes. Reconstruction, yes.
George, you want to ask a question?
No, just another clarification, because this happens even with the council members. All of the applications that I've ever seen online or physically handed to you, community boards are not nonprofits. We're city agencies. So you just said that we can apply for stuff, but the application process itself has put your EIN number, put your date of birth, not date of birth, you're doing business as, all this other stuff. We're city agencies. If you wanted to do this, you should do it.
Our application don't ask you for all that. Our application asks you for,
I've had to fill out applications and it does ask for that stuff.
not ours, I'm saying ours.
Never asked for it.
Okay.
There you go. We're talking about
I'm talking
ours.
about our process. We don't ask you for that
The
information.
city council requires it.
Yes, okay, we don't.
Okay. So basically what Betty's saying is there are two applications should you require. Should you require it from our office as well as the city council. But for us, we have a deadline that's way ahead of the city councils.
Again, from historical purposes, our community board, many of you know, we're in a former precinct. It was renovated over 20-something years ago. I wasn't there when it happened, but it was something that was negotiated with the city, with the borough president's office when Freddie was the borough president. And we got a renovated office. The top 6 requests from the community board, other than parks projects, related projects, maybe the bottom 3, you said you take are 10 for capital, is a request for new windows. Again, never addressed. And that, I'll talk to you, because I did speak to DCAS about that, and they have a completely different process than what you're describing. So I will talk to you about that separately.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll, you know.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Obviously, any questions that come forth after that, you're free to reach out to Betty, as you guys always have access to her and access to any one of us. So with that said, those are the 2 presentations that we have today. Does anybody have any announcements that they want to share?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How you doing? Tyreek Israel again. Our office is participating in participatory budgeting. We have over 150 submissions already. So please let the board, the constituents know, please. Submit any kind of participatory budgeting ideas, and it's all around capital for your neighborhood. It's $1 million. So as Betty was mentioning, you know, they may not be able to fund the whole thing, but, you know, finding multiple sources of funding streams tends to get projects moving. So it's just another way how you can access some more dollars.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if this is on your notes, so I'm sorry, Marisol, if it is. But just want to highlight that in the Northeast Bronx, in our district, we recently had a fire at 2019 Wallace Avenue. And so Councilmember Riley, in amazing partnership with BP Gibson, Congressman Torres, Assembly Member Zaccaro, and Senator Bailey, we are collecting new items as well as hygiene products and things of that nature for the families affected. I believe at this moment we are at the count of over 70 plus families and 228 individuals. So Marisol, I'll share the flyer with you. I know Justin might have it, but if you guys can blast it out and we can share it amongst our communities, it will be very greatly appreciated, as we have families not only in the Bronx, but some of them are in Harlem and in Manhattan as well, because we just didn't have enough space to house them. And so really collecting these items will be very important. So if you guys can share that with your communities, we will greatly appreciate it.
So just to add to what Simone said, there was a meeting. I don't know if you guys saw me. I was listening. I had my headset on. I was listening to a meeting with the BP and as she mentioned, all the elected officials that are coming together to come up with a plan to help these families, and that's one of them. So as soon as we get the finalized flyer and information, we will definitely share it with you. There are a couple of initiatives that are being put in place, and these families are definitely in need. Thank you so much for that.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to offer a brief update on our the permit placard for people with disabilities, a parking permit. So the application process is a joint effort between DOT and the health department. So just as a recap, initial applications coming through DOT, it's processed by their agency, and then the application is transferred to the health department for a medical review. And so this is basically a process to verify that a person is disabled and to make sure that, they get the permit as needed. The permits have to be renewed every few years, regardless of permanent disability status. And this is just a way that we can, update our records accordingly. We are looking at over 100 business days for total processing time, and so that's up from the usual 90. The reason for that is, the budget cuts have limited the amount of times that we have doctors on staff to review applications. So I just want to share that as a caveat. We often get questions from our council members' offices and community boards, seeking updates on the permit status. And so as of the beginning of January, we are working through applications that were submitted towards the end of October. So just to give you a kind of a ballpark window as to the application process. Some of the most common challenges that I think constituents run into when submitting their applications is that they don't provide the necessary medical documentation, and that will result in a denial. So whenever a constituent is denied, their application for a permit is denied, we send a denial letter, and it gives directions on exactly what details are missing. The application is pretty specific and thorough. It could be something as specific as, documentation not being on official medical provider letterhead. So it's, very specific. And so I just want to say that to let everybody know that, we want to work with constituents to make sure that if they want to appeal, they can reach out to the health department directly. And if they want an update on their permit, there is also a DOT hotline where they could get this information. I have both phone numbers, so I'm happy to share if people want to jot them down really quickly. So the DOT customer service hotline is 718-433-3100. Again, that's 718-433-3100. And our health department medical team office number is 347-396-6552. And I just want to clarify that these numbers should be used by the constituents only. If you all have questions about the application, just please reach out to me directly. These numbers are for constituents only. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. I just have a quick question. As they're waiting for their applications to be approved, does it go retroactive?
Oh, so you're saying if they
So
have...
let's say the application, let's say my placard, which I don't have one, by the way, is due to expire January 31st. But obviously, you're not going to be looking at that till maybe March. Does the approval go retroactive?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we, DOT is able to offer a temporary... temporary. Yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome.
So just in the case that someone's permit will lapse, just please reach out to DOT. They don't have to be worried about, an expired permit. They can offer a temporary permit in the meantime, and then, once we finish processing the application, then the final decision will be made. If it's a denial, of course, the temporary permit would be revoked, but, just sharing that bit
Appreciate
as well.
it. Thank you. I think
Thank you.
Tyreek has a question.
Can I add something? So
Sure.
for congestion pricing exemptions, you would need to apply for a New York City PPD permit. The New York State tag doesn't give you the exemption.
You said a PPE?
The
PPD.
PPD.
It's a permit placard, parking permit placard for people with disabilities. Yeah, it's just, yeah.
For the temporary tag, how long does it last? Is it last the 4 months or
Until you get the
decision?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Michael, and you had a question?
Yeah, I do, but not to that, no.
No, Jeremy, did you have a question regarding the plan? Okay, I'm sorry.
Who's next?
Good morning, everyone. Good to be back with you. Mike Sharp, Department of Finance. First, 2 points of commendation. You folks in the Bronx have been really good about reaching out regarding constituent issues or concerns. My department, my team, appreciates that. And something else that you've also been very good at is working collaboratively. When you have events, it's usually not just one of you, it's a few elected officials or elected official and a community board working together. And since we're such a small team, that really helps us to cover the amount of territory that we need to cover. I want to talk to you about 3 dates: January 15th, February 15th, and March 15th. This is the season that we call Notice of Property Value season at the Department of Finance. And in a few days, your constituents will receive a letter in the mail which tells them an estimate of their property taxes to come, what exemptions they have, and also their property value as we have it on record. And so that usually makes your constituents wonder about 3 things. One, how did we come to that number as far as the value is concerned? What exemptions they're eligible for, and how can they apply for any type of discount they're eligible for. So please have in mind ways to reach out to us, and I want to suggest 3. One, if you have virtual events that you sponsor in your community, maybe there's a community Zoom meeting or something like that, we're happy to attend as guests, bring the information, do the necessary emailing to you so you can have information to distribute, and also show you how to get the information on the website. Another option is to have an office hours at your particular location. Now this, we work collaboratively with you because you make appointments with your constituents. We bring a team to your office and we discuss the issues that may be there. We have maybe a conversation before the event with some of your constituents to make sure that we address the issues. And lastly, some of you want to do public-facing events in your community, and we're happy to do that as well. We ask in that instance, though, that you once again collaborate together. In order for us to cover the key areas in the Bronx that we need council members or state officials, community boards to work together on things so we can do things in groups. And so that's basically what we wanted to share with you today. February 15th is another date. Those of you who have co-op and condo residents in your districts, for those that are a part of the co-op condo abatement program, they must have that registered by that date. And finally, March 15th is the last date to apply for any exemptions, personal property tax exemptions. We also have an easier way to schedule events. There's a QR code I have with me. You can scan it on your phone and simply submit the survey. We'll get back to you shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please hand it over to Jocelyn.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jocelyn Bennett, representing DSS. I just have a few quick announcements. The HRA side, the EBT skimming, unfortunately, was not extended from federal authorities. So after December 20th, unfortunately, they will not reimburse for EBT skimming. I believe the extension was from, not the extension, the time period was from October 2022 to December 20th, 2024. So unfortunately, that puts us where we are with skimming. Hopefully that will change, but that is all we have for now. On the DHS side, the Hope Count is coming. Annual Hope Count for 2025. It is January 28th. That is usually the coldest day of the year, but it is the count for the city to record unsheltered individuals. So there's a team of canvassers that go out between the hours of 10 to 4. You can volunteer for inside availability and external. I believe there are multiple sites throughout the boroughs, and if you are interested, you can go to Hope NYC to register. The second is Code Blue season. No person found that is unsheltered on the street will be denied housing. So if you see someone, please encourage folks to call 311, where a team can be dispatched within, I believe it's a 2-hour window, to offer services. And that's pretty much it.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else before we go into ours? Did you have a question? Is it questions or announcements?
No, questions. So you want to do announcements? Go ahead.
Okay, let us do the announcements, and then I'll hand it over to Kira first.
All right, hey everyone. It is that time. We have sent over our community board application for new applicants and reappointments. We're just waiting for it to go live on our website. So once it is, I'll send that out to you. We will be reaching out to your board members who are up for reappointment, but I ask that you also help with that reminder process. Last year, we did have a few people who missed the deadline, and they weren't reappointed to the board, even though there were several reminders. So, they really need to, kind of get it in on time. So once that's live, I'll share that with all of you, and even the council members and agencies. We ask that you spread that information. So thank you.
I just want to share a couple of the events that are coming up in addition to what we've already talked about for 2910 Wallace. There is a clothing drive that our offices, there's a Coke giveaway on Thursday, January 16th from 4 to 8 here in this building, and it's going to be while supplies last, and they should be reaching out to our office to check in and register. No registration? First come, first serve. First come, first serve. I think, okay, we'll leave it at that. I know that they try to match the sizes with the families. So, and that's on Thursday, January 16th from 4 to 8. And it's going to be while supplies last. In addition to that, we have our Martin Luther King celebration, which is going to be hosted at we're hosting a community interfaith celebration on Monday, January 20th at 10 a.m. at the Trinity Baptist Church, located at 808 East 224th Street, and that starts at 10. And then just something else to keep on your radar, our State of the Borough is tentative scheduled for February 20th. So just dates that you should keep in mind. February 20th is the State of the Borough. And while I still have the floor, our next meeting for the Borough Service Cabinet is February 5th, and the next Borough Board will be February 10th. With that, I'll...
The list of reappointments, are you going to send us that list before the application goes live, or you're sending that post?
I usually send it to the district managers to help me remind the board members that they're up for reappointment and if they need to reapply. I don't normally send it to the council members until I get the applications.
So it would be great, our suggestion, and I'm just speaking for Councilmember Riley's office.
Sure.
If we can get that list when the district managers
Okay.
get it.
Yeah.
Because we follow up with our reappointments as well as do our own interview. So if we can be on the same
Okay.
time frame, that would be very helpful. So if you can share that with us when you share it with them, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll happily do that if that helps the council members speed up their process.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a follow-up on what Simone said, like the same thing with us, or all like community boards, it will go through me and also like the member. And like, for example, like last year, we had like a little bit of an issue with like us not receiving the applications on time and then like having a little backup, so if we could have it whenever the district managers do.
Yeah, so the initial list will just be the members who are up for reappointment. Those members may not all reapply to the board. So once we get the applications, you get that link, and those are all electronic for the council members. So that's a little bit different. So that's sort of the lag there. But I will send out who's up for reappointment, but again, not all those members may choose to reapply.
And that's fine. I think it just allows the council members' offices to be proactive, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so we can have those pre-existing conversations and know ahead of time who intends to reapply or not. So we're not slowing you up, because I know I slow you up, girl. You gotta be proactive.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
You change your mind?
I changed my mind, but George, still has a question. Right? Am I wrong?
No, it's okay.
All right. I put you on the spot.
No, I just, these are, I'm asking these very purposely. The first question is, since there's no vote, for example, this meeting, is this something that we could do in the future virtually? Or is it required because this is an public meeting, it has to be in person?
The borough boards are normally in person, so we have to have them in person.
Okay. No, good to know.
The borough
Again, there's
service
a purpose.
cabinets, we have been holding them virtually. And God willing, we'll continue to do that.
No, that's
And
fine.
then- But just, no.
I don't need an explanation.
No, for the rest of the folks, since you've raised it up. The Borough Service Cabinet meetings are held virtually, and that has helped because then they can speak to the agencies that may not always be available to come to an in-person meeting, and that has been helpful. The borough boards are in person, and now that we have this lovely space, we're hoping that we can get more people to attend fully these meetings. Right now, we've been providing information, but there's going to be a time when obviously we're going to have a vote, and we would definitely like to have the full participation of the board to move those items forward. Go ahead, George.
Thank you. The second question, we were talking about it when we came in. District managers received an email from Doris, which is the records management for the city, about requests that, very similar to the APOs, we felt like we shouldn't be responsible for. We would love assistance. I know I attend, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, I attend meetings for the working group of district managers citywide. Other borough presidents have been proactive in responding to this, and I'm just curious, is there going to be a response from your office to sort of absolve us of the responsibility of doing this?
Rob Maraglia, who's our general counsel, has been notified of this, and he's working on a response. So we will have a response once he completes talking with Doris and to determine, who's responsible for what, whether we're partly responsible or if the boards themselves are responsible. So once we get that response, we will share it.
And just I guess if it's ultimately determined that we are responsible, that I recall having a meeting that you guys initiated many years ago with Doris.
For technical
because
support.
we've received no training on how to do this sort of stuff.
Okay, we'll definitely look into that if that is what it becomes. Jeremy, you good? Okay, no. All right, so with that said, again, I want to thank everybody for being here and for taking the time. We have this space now, and this is where we'll be meeting, and, it just so that everybody understands. We have our own space now. Thank you so much